Hey, welcome to No Justice, No Peace. We are super excited tonight. So when we started this from the march to the mic type of movement, we wanted to bring in some voices that are so important to this movement. But not just voices that you hear all the time, but voices that are really behind the scenes making things happen in such a way. And so we wanted to make sure that those voices were amplified tonight. And so tonight, the NJMP team welcomes our first guest moderator that we've ever had on really any of our virtual town halls. And so I'm super excited for it to be my friend, someone who has loved on me, welcomed me, supported me throughout my entire time at Drake, my entire time while I've been in this community for the last 10 years. She's literally been a pillar, her and her husband. And so, if you don't mind, welcome to who's going to moderate tonight's conversation, the great, the awesome, the amazing Miss Stephanie Burkhalter. And
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Rob. Those are huge shoes that I gotta really fill them, don't I? Well, great. That's great. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I truly feel like this is a blessing and wasn't something that I had even honestly thought about. But when Rob contacted me, I said yes immediately. So I'm really excited for tonight, and I look forward to great conversation with everybody. I would like to introduce to some and present to others the wonderful panelists that we're going to be sharing the screens with tonight. We have the awesome Dr. Mary Chapman, who's a retired from the Des Moines Area Community College as Vice President of Community and Workforce Partnerships. During her tenure there, she worked with Central Iowa businesses to identify employment opportunities for which were underrepresented, as well as disenfranchised youth and adults. So, Dr. Chapman, we thank you. Welcome to the group. We have the incomparable, lovely Miss Claudia Schabel, President of Schabel Solutions, which combines she's got she says a decade, but it's probably a little bit more than that, of experience as a diversity and inclusion practitioner and strategist with Fortune 500 companies. And her multicultural background is to offer coaching and consulting in areas of equity, cultural competency, diversity, and inclusion to businesses, educational and not-for-profit organizations. So, Ms. Claudia, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Our next panelist is Monica Reyes Rodriguez, who is an activist, socialist, community organizer, and a financial expert. She was born in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, Mexico, correct? And she immigrated to California through the desert at the age of 3. So that just kind of lets you know of her fortitude, of how strong she is to be able to come through the desert and at that very tender young age, alongside her mother and her younger sister, who were fleeing the country due to domestic violence. So we thank you for being a part of this conversation. And last but certainly not least, Sherry Washington, who I've not had the pleasure of meeting in person just yet, but I understand that you are the current president of the NAACP of Fort Dodge, Iowa. So to all of you, I say welcome, and let's get started talking.
Yes, the re-chapter president.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. You guys all have extremely distinguished careers within your wheelbarrow there. And so you've transcended our communities in a multitude of ways. And so this is a really wonderful way that we can all just say thank you to you, but we can try to kind of pull from you to learn a little bit more. And so my first question I'm going to start with, based on what you ladies have seen, what do you believe is the biggest difference between the marches that happened during the civil rights era to the marches of today? Dr. Chapman, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I want to begin by saying that I just feel so honored to be included with this amazing group of women, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have this evening. As I think about that question, of course, I'm in that generation where I was during the 60s, the 50s, and the 60s. And the difference that I see is that in the 60s, and when you think about Dr. King, it was unified, there was a focus, during that time, primarily getting the right to vote. There were visible inequities, whether it was the place that not having access to public places, very prominent. So it caused everyone more of a focus of what they were marching for and what they wanted to see happen as a result of policies and what they wanted to see change. And it was basically, even though we had allies during that time, primarily African Americans, but today, as I look at the makeup of the marches, very diverse, very intergenerational, even though they were intergenerational back in the past. But today, it's like everyone is marching for various reasons. They see whether it's the environment, or whether it is, policing, or whether it's voting, or whether it's housing. So there are a group of people marching together, but they are marching for different things, which is good, but not as, I don't feel it has a unified like in the past. You knew what you were marching for. You knew what the outcome was going to be, and everyone was on the same page.
It's wonderful. Sherry, how about you? What do you feel the major differences are?
I feel that as a native are both from the South. They from Mississippi to Iowa. Hearing those stories of the segregation issue that they were living in, it kind of seems as though we went past it. We're really a lot of what we've heard of, and we're experiencing a lot of setback, I feel. We're seeing it daily news. We're seeing it in our community families. So the march difference came very far. However, I feel we have a long way to go. So those are my
very
thoughts
good.
on.
Yeah, Claudia.
Until now.
Claudia.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. And I also before answering.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for letting me join you and being in your presence today. So humbling. I am going to say, Dr. Chapman is an inspiration to me, and I'm tempted to say what she said. But let me start by saying that as an immigrant, I have become a student of history in this country. And I am still teaching myself and learning from others on the impact of the civil rights movement and what that meant to people, what it means to people today, and how different it might look like from my own perspective. What I have noticed based on my own learnings and based on what I have been experienced directly here now in history is that the movement in the past seemed to be more focused and hierarchical. A lot more people identified as leaders, and today I feel that the influence and power is evenly distributed.
Mm-hmm.
Both models might have pluses and minuses.
Mm-hmm.
Only history, I think, will tell what exactly that looks like. But there is value in both models, there is value in both approaches. And I can't wait to continue to see what continues to develop ahead of us as people continue to march and use their voice to make change to our societies and call out social justice issues primarily.
Great response. Monica, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And I really many of you that are in here today to be with panelists and moderator. And as for the differences between the two, I will do a disclosure. I wasn't born yet when the first marches went on, so I only can share what I have read in textbooks and what was taught to me in my education. Which, so just from my point of reference, I feel like the civil rights movement, we felt. I feel like it was a lot of very basic rights that we didn't have yet that we had to fight for. And now, years later, we are seeing these marches for social justice, but this time we have the basics, but we really are getting into the details. What are the laws that are still holding people back? How is racism or discrimination empowered through our laws, and how can we battle that legally so that those barriers can be broken down? And so I feel like this time we're really getting into details. It's very messy. It's really doing a lot of work, a lot of research, and very consistent and mentioning of these issues. But I'm very proud to be living in this era of this movement, because I feel like we've done, but there's always room for improvement. There's always more work to be done.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I noticed the most about the marches early on was that the youthfulness of the marches now. And it seemed like there was a lot more young people, which is good, because we want them to use their voice. But just like what you said, I think both you, Monica, and you, Claudia, both said, a little ungelled. We've got to kind of mold them still a little bit to keep their focus on what the real issues are and not let it get blurred by the outside noise. And then so while I was very appreciative and grateful to see the number of young people that were actually involved and not in all of the, looting and tearing up buildings and that type of stuff, the ones that were actually there trying to make a difference and using their voice for that, I was grateful to see that, because that's what we're going to have in order to move forward. We just can't stay where we've been. We've got to be able to move forward. So I think that was the biggest thing that I noticed. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit because, as we all know, we're doing this because we're in the middle of a pandemic. My goodness. And here, 7.5 months still into this pandemic, in my opinion, still in the first phase. I feel like we've ever gotten out of the phase. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think it's been noted, is that the coronavirus has exposed the disparities within the healthcare system. And I'm just wondering, do you believe that the current administration is responsible for so many of the deaths that have occurred? We can start with Sherry. How about Sherry, you start this time?
I, I and then you kind of went out and then you're.
I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with Sherry. So I'm going to switch for just a moment. We're going to come back to you, Sherry. I'll put the same question to you, Monica. Do you feel that the current administration is responsible for the deaths of the 212,000 that have passed?
I believe that the current administration has responsibility in this, but we cannot swipe away all of the past and established disparities that have already existed for many years, and this pandemic was able to shine a light on. I think that this a lot of the issues that we saw in its truest and ugliest form, we have for many decades, many years, swept under the rug. And so I know that there has been social research to that there have been many social justice issues, and there's also social research providing solutions for all of this. And unfortunately, we have lacked the leaders with the courage to implement solutions. So I think that whether it's this administration, next administration, this election, future elections, I hope that those of you that are able to hear us think about running for office someday, whether it's city council or school administration or local, state legislator, national. I think it's important to have people that know what's going on, know what's not right, and are ready to put in the work and the time into providing real solutions for these issues. I think that you should go for it. It's about representation and who's in those positions of power.
Wonderful, wonderful. Claudia, what did you think?
Yeah, that's a terrific question, Stephanie. It made me think. I never thought about the loss of life in the context of the pandemic into who's responsible for it. What I think I have been thinking a lot about is who's responsible for mitigating the inequities that we have that have been magnified, as Monica mentioned, by the coronavirus pandemic. And I think in that context, we can definitely point the finger at multiple institutions, multiple stakeholders that could have been taking a more active role in closing some of those gaps. I'm talking about the wealth gap. I'm talking about the health equity gap, talking about the educational gap. There are multiple parties that could have been much more active in either implementing a plan, sticking to the vision of closing those gaps. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. What I think has happened now, Stephanie, is that no one can any longer pretend that we don't have those disparities in our communities. And I think moving forward, it's going to force all of us to be much more sincere in understanding how to talk about those gaps. And those that are willing to engage in a sincere conversation, I think they will have a very difficult time explaining themselves.
Sherry, were you able to get the grasp of the question this time? I think we're still having a little technical difficulty with Sherry's side. Mary, we're going to jump to you.
That's a good question, Stephanie. Thank you for it. I mean, it's a question that everyone has been asking during this pandemic season as to who's responsible. And I think that Monica and Claudia, when they touched on the just the disparities have always been there. And even with this administration, it's been highlighted more just because of their uh, lack of compassion and commitment to addressing just the basic needs of the common person. But with all of the administrations, we have had advocacies or advocate groups that have been talking about just the disparity between in the health area between uh, persons of populations of color in terms of the gap and the disparities that are impacted by the income gap. So that has always been there. The disparities have always been there, but they just seem to be magnified now because of the current administration has just shown the lack of attention to it and just not focusing on it. But we also individually, we take some responsibility for it in terms of caring for our fellow citizen, knowing that what we need to do to take care of ourselves, then thinking about our family, thinking about our friends, just following the simple example, I mean, the simple request of wearing a mask, paying attention to social distancing, washing your hands, just those simple things of wearing a mask. You still have people just are just not paying attention to it. And so that's some responsibility that we have to take that in spite of the administration, it's individuals and their lack of caring for their fellow citizen.
Great comment. To kind of piggyback on that, I was going to ask, on a local level, how do you feel, knowing that Iowa is still considered a hot zone, do you feel it's too late to have a statewide mandate to wear a mask? Or do you think it is something that if we were to have it happen, it would help the state of Iowa to kind of reduce the numbers? Sherry, can you hear us now?
Sure. Yes, I hear you now. I see the messages are popping up that they're kind of working on the back to get my connection better.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to you. I didn't get a chance to say that in the very beginning. Connection was so choppy, but I wanted to say thank you to the moderator. Thank you, wonderful women that are on the panel today. It's Mary Chapman and the two other wonderful women. Truly, it's an honor and a blessing to be a part of this conversation. And to everyone else who is involved and hosting, and Minister Rob Johnson as well. And I feel as though for our local government and for Iowa, our numbers get all. With those that have been infected, those that have been hospitalized, and for those that have passed, one was too many. So if it requires a mandate to wear a mask, whatever we need to do so no one else loses a life, no one else is hospitalized, no one else suffers from this, then I think we should do it. We can't go back and redo what's already been done. However, we can work on how we go forward with this. So that requirement into action would definitely support it because no one deserves to have to suffer more than we have. Those are my
Amen.
thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, we all know that within, like, I believe it's 25 days or less that this next general election will be upon us. And recognizing that this could potentially be the most important election of my life and some others' lives, why do you think people choose not to vote? You know, for so many who have, you know, forged ahead of us to give us the right, why do you feel that people still opt not to use their voice by voting? We'll start with Claudia.
Yes, Stephanie, absolutely. I think that first, before I answer this question, I really wanted to endorse what Sherry mentioned. It is very unfortunate that a public health measure has been politicized and put so many of us at risk. So I would 100% support a mandate for the state of Iowa if that ensures that we're safer and healthier. So absolutely. Now,
Wonderful.
in terms of why people choose not to vote, those that can vote, I'm only focusing on those that can vote. I don't quite know. I only speculate. I truly think that coming from where I come from, people are required to vote because if you don't vote, I'm born in Brazil, lived in Brazil for my 17 years. Stop worrying about voting. Hearing politicians, and we have a multi-party system, so it was very common for my grandparents, for my aunts, parents to be talking about politics. So growing up that type of upbringing and moving to the United States where you're not even wearing a mask, like in a political issue, around myself. I truly think that politics frowned upon, then people to necessarily sometimes keep those political beliefs private, and it's very difficult when you have a space to talk, discuss some of those political views, to engage in the political system, to engage in the political process. So I think there's a very wide array of reasons why people don't vote, but I'd like to focus on why people don't engage in the conversation to start with. And I think potentially be the beginning of that reasoning.
Very, very, very valid. Very valid. Mary, what do you think?
What I would like to add is that uh, it's really disappointing to keep hearing more and more individuals saying that they're not going to vote because, I mean, why should I vote? My vote is not going to count. I mean, so I'm going to stay home. And I think and part of it, I think, is because you vote and you engage in something because you think you're going to get something out of it. It's like with my investment, there is going to be a return. And so we know that in the political process, I mean, there's so many diverse needs and challenges that need to be addressed. Not everyone is going to get 100% of everything that they need, everything that they're requesting. But we need to ensure that at least something that an individual can see that they are receiving something back for their vote, their investment. And for many years, and I think now we're hearing it, and especially from the young people, is that they have been observing that we have the policymakers that are saying, okay, we hear you. Yes, we're going to do this. And then it's like a year or so later, nothing has changed. You can't even see any movement. Or so I think the lack of trust, the lack of confidence, the lack of faith, because they haven't been able to see just something. they haven't seen any change as it relates to their parents or their grandparents. So it's been generational. So people, I just think people are observing, and now we are hearing from them saying that I haven't seen anything that you said that you were going to do. And even from a local level, just seeing something locally, if it doesn't happen, it's just hard to get that trust back. And it has been challenging to get people to think about why your vote matters. Do you think that with your voice, that just give it one more try, encouraging individuals to make that vote. But it is so hard because of not seeing what your return is for your.
How about you, Monica? What do you think?
So I do want to disclose, I unfortunately cannot vote because of my immigration status, but I definitely do want to take this time of you that have the right to vote, have that privilege to please guys that for people like myself that still are unable to. And I think systematically we haven't been encouraged to vote. And can start by teaching people about the electoral process. We can register youth in the high schools. I remember I had a very politically engaged teacher, but he never disclosed what party he affiliated himself with, because his mission was to make sure everyone that was in his class was politically engaged and knowledgeable and would to vote, participate in the caucuses. And unfortunately, I don't in many schools. And then along with that, I think the resources are not being designated to Black and Brown communities. I don't think that Black and valued by either political party. I think that there's still a big lack of economic or other resources being designated to our community. And then also accessibility. We can register our vehicles, we can apply for our driver's license, do a lot of things online nowadays. I think that accessibility to be improved. It's awesome that we're already doing early voting in the state of Iowa, but this needs to be across voter suppression, and we need to address that as a nation. And in Iowa, we have so many resources. I'm sure that we can find a way to make voting easier and utilize technology to create that access for Americans.
And I'll put the same question to Sherry, but I'd also like her to answer, if you don't vote, do you get the opportunity or do you get the right to complain about things?
Well, first I'll piggyback off of what the 3 women shadow. I believe what each one of them just brought to the table, so valid and so true. Voters feel that a lot of folks are Black, feel that they didn't feel anything change for them, and they feel sometimes folks only come around every 2 years, 4 years, time that you show up at their doors. So once you show people who you are the first time, they will believe you. Just throughout our communities, to stick to our word, to stick to what we're saying, to hear their voices, and to be able to follow through on those issues. So those are the things that I think all of us are doing, but it takes everyone to work together. And that being said, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. That's just like a lottery ticket. Buy one, you're not in the game. So you gotta have a voice. In order to have a voice, you need to vote and follow through. You don't have others to jump in and do the actions for you. jump in and do it yourselves as well. You know, we can all jump in. It's a effort. It takes a village to do this. It takes a nation. It takes eight. It takes each and to execute.
I believe in our attempt to get to. Sure, I'm sorry, Sherry. I was going to just say that in our attempt to do exactly what you're saying, I believe that it's the first time voters, the people who are going to be voting for the first time. I have one in my house. He's going to get to vote in a general election for the first time. And, you know, now that the governor has signed the executive order allowing felons who've completed their restitution, those opportunities. What are your thoughts on that? We're going to start with Sherry this time.
My thoughts are get out and vote. I hear vote, 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 vote. This is an opportunity that you've had for how long? So if you've never voted, take the opportunity to do it. Take the time to do it. There has been a lot of folks who have fought for this, including the folks who weren't vote. So now you have a voice. Now there's no excuse. Now this is your chance for your voice to be heard, be at the table. So I encourage any and please, if you're 18 and older, vote. Everyone in your household, you know, your community, wherever you go, just encourage folks to vote. You don't have to push a candidate or a party on them, but encourage them to vote and to use their voice. That
absolutely,
you're still at square one.
Yeah. I watched a little bit of today's opening remarks with the Senate Judiciary Committee for the Supreme Court opening, and we clearly see the fundamental differences between the two parties, right down party lines. And I'm wondering how you ladies feel if this particular nomination is based solely on the fact that the current administration feels that she will repeal the Obamacare Act. And what do you think of that? Claudia?
Before I answer that question, Stephanie, let me just say something about voting. What I love for people in the business community to do in order to support our right to vote, support their employees to actually go out there and exercise that right, is to consider to give that day as a volunteer day, as a day off, a company holiday. So those that have multiple barriers, they have to juggle kids, they have to juggle all the other things before they get to work, they actually can make it to the voting booth. So employers do consider doing that. I think it'll be a tremendous gift to this country. In addition to that, when we talk about voting, most of us might only be thinking about the presidential election and what that means to us as a country. But a lot of those nominations, like the one you mentioned, Stephanie, can be for their entire life. And it can have a compounded impact on our own lives. So when it comes to healthcare and making that decision, to me, it's very scary. It's very scary. My spouse and I are able to purchase health insurance because of the Obamacare, and I think it would be very uncertain for us not to have that ability. So this is personal. It is impacting us directly. So we're following this conversation very closely. I know today was the first day, and I need to do some catching up on what was discussed. I find it unfortunate that it's actually happening because it would have been much better to have this hearing after the election, my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Monica, how about you? Monica.
So when I heard the knee, actually took some time to search that person and the history of that person's actions and participation in organizations, and just try to do my due diligence of finding out more about this person. And unfortunately, I am made very uncomfortable about the future of our direction as a nation because of this person's background. I think that most of us, well, I personally would have preferred to have this appointed after the election. I'm in a complete agreement with Claudia. And I hope that other people do their due diligence research, not only this nominee, but anybody that's going to be on the ballot. We just like on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, we have many hours that we pour from our lives into social media to entertain ourselves. We should also be pouring some time into researching who these ballots, where is their proven action designated? Like, are they putting any work into social justice or what's important for us as voters? And so I encourage all of you guys to do your due diligence, research the people who are on those ballots. The important phrase and this is locally, nationally. There's just so much writing on this election that I encourage you all to do your research.
Thank you. Mary?
That's a good question. I had made several notes here. Looking at the background of the current nominee, you think about the decisions that she's made, the comments that she's made, where she's gone on record. So you kind of know what her philosophy is, what her beliefs are, and you would hope that the judges that are making decisions about our lives would follow the Constitution and do what's right. But that has not, it doesn't seem to have been the case where the justices let their personal beliefs and feelings determine how they're going to vote on certain issues. And so with this nomination, it is clear that the votes are there, and so she is going to be confirmed. And so I think, just putting it before the public in terms of what her confirmation is going to mean to us as a nation. It will mean that, yes, Obamacare is going to be in jeopardy because we know that the vote is going to be there to repeal it. Repealing or rolling back Roe versus Wade, looking at all of the equal rights, even voting rights, can be jeopardized by this conservative-leaning judge. But think about, and I think Monica alluded to this, and that is locally. If you look at the ballot this year, the ballot that we're voting on the presidency, and we have the congressional candidates. But when you turn it over, you have the justices that are up for re-election, and you vote yes or no. And when you go down that list and you look at those names, you have no idea, no clue as to how they made decisions, how they made decisions on opinions that came before them. So we do need to do our due diligence. Many of these judges, we probably didn't even know they were going to be on the ballot. And that is lack of education on our part, knowing, being educated as what's going to be on the ballot for us to vote and make a decision. So locally, we need to hold the judges, the justice system accountable here, because in every election season, you will see judges on there where if you haven't been following how they've been dealing with issues that impact us as the Black and Brown community, we need to be making that known so that we can vote our voice. And that is, we are not pleased with how you are dealing with the inequities or issues that are important to us. So we do owe that in terms of the justices, not only nationally, but locally. We can vote for the justices that are making decisions on our lives.
Sherry.
It's the, I think, election after probably not that sort of work. That's something that you don't want to rush, and it's something that needs time to, and I just don't feel that this needs to think of that play election.
I think I got the gist of what you were trying to say. You were getting a little choppy there a little bit, but I think we're all in agreement that we all have to do our due diligence going forward with all of these elections. Like Mary said, local, state, hold people accountable. I think that's what needs to be done. We're coming up on a few minutes here, and I just decided just the second that the last question I'm going to put to you ladies is something that if you knew then what you know now, what would you tell your younger self at the age of 21?
We're starting with Mary, right?
Yeah, we can start with Mary.
That's been a long time ago. That's like 7 decades ago. No, 6 decades ago. But oh my gosh, what I would know. I think I would be more observant of. But I was observant when I was younger. In terms of you always at that age, you're always looking for. You usually have role models or someone that you look up to. As you're thinking about decisions. But I think I would say I was more narrow in my thinking about a career. So if I had to do it over again, I would have been would have looked more broadly at careers and more broadly at, taking a chance, being more taking more risk in thinking about where I want to do my education and not be afraid of, taking the comfort way out. Because at that age, when I was at the age of, going to college, having the opportunity to go to Smith, a private school on the East Coast, looking at going to an HBCU, and for me, it was really foreign. And when I'm looking at those opportunities now, I wish, oh my gosh, I wish I had done that rather than being comfortable going to a state school,
Mhm.
which was okay. I got a great education, but I think it would have been a more interesting and broader education if I had, if I had to do it all over again, I would do that.
Claudia?
Just because I told Mary to go first, right?
Yes.
Well, I think there are multiple things here that come to mind. Uh, one of the things that I have learned with age is really to be kinder to myself and really extend myself the grace I extend to others. Sometimes it's so easy to fall into a pattern and be a perfectionist or very demanding of ourselves because, as you know, Black and brown women do pressure themselves
Mhm.
to achieve greatness in life, and really sometimes in some instances even exceed their own expectations, and that's all great. But equally important is to extend grace to yourself, be kind to yourself, because this is the long haul, and you really need to have that grace in order to continue to thrive. And my younger self, I don't know if you know this, Stephanie, but I have a twin sister as well. And my twin sister has been such a great source of support and inspiration. So either you have a sibling, either you're the only child, find sisterhood in your life.
Mm.
I think women together are a force to reckon with, and we're better together. So find your sister, find sisterhood in life, and I think that that will put you on the right path to success.
Love it. Love that. How about you, Sherry?
I think at 21, I should have registered back then, and I had not. Um, it was later in my 20s that I did. I would tell my younger self that I should have registered to vote age 18 and started the voting in the activism in the community work from 18. Yeah, although we're talking about 21, 18 should have been the year and the timeline that I should have registered to vote. So by 21, I think I would have been paid. That would be what I would tell my younger self. 21 and 18 is our elders used to say, hear me now, understand me. Well, hear me now, understand me later. 18, 19, 20, hear me now, understand me later.
Great, great, great response. How about you, Monica?
So, to my 21-year-old self, I have two. The first one would be to build my social capital. I feel like over time I've learned it's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. And building meaningful relationships in life is super important. And I would have told myself that, and then to address my mental health. And so throughout my life, I've had to overcome quite a bit of trauma, and a lot of that trauma came back later on in life. And now as a adult woman, I have had to go back to issues that continue to affect me today. And I think that because of certain circumstances, whether it's tradition or culture or just lack of resources, many of us don't take time to address them. And I believe 21 is a great age to hopefully be independent, where we can address those things.
Those were all really great and wonderful responses, and it just came. I don't know why, but I just kind of went with the flow that as to the reason why I asked that particular question. But I want to thank all of you again for this opportunity to have this little chat with you lovely ladies. And, I know Rob, I think he's still on, and I just want to give him a shout out to him and his project of the No Justice, No Peace, and encourage anybody that's on whatever social media platform that you're listening to us on to visit the nojusticepac.org to learn about and donate and volunteer, because I'm sure that Rob would love to have your help with a multitude of things, I'm sure. But it's been a pleasure. Good to see everybody. I'm sorry that it's, in a pandemic, but, as my husband always says, this is our new normal. So
it is. Well, thank you, ladies. And I just regret we couldn't hear more of Sherry, because she is just an awesome leader at Dodge and across the state. So, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to meet Monica.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for moderating this conversation. You did a great job. And Rob, keep up the good work. Excited
absolutely.
to see what the organization will continue to become and mean to all of us. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
And thank you, Ms. Moderator.
Oh, thank you. It was an honor. I felt very comfortable. This is maybe it's a new calling. I don't know.
You got it. Whoa.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everyone.
Okay.